So this is a candy roaster squash. I have a video about that, so I'll link to that so you can go find out about them. Very similar to pumpkin, but better, I think, a richer, sweeter taste. Candy roaster. So this is probably the biggest pumpkin I've ever grown. Normally mine do not get that big. This was the year for winter squash though. My winter squash did better than anything in the garden. This is one of the smaller cushaws that I grew. I think I'm going to share it with Granny because she doesn't need as much as what I do with the bigger ones. There's a little butternut squash still hanging out and hiding. Another cushaw. So you can see this is one of the winter squash that's kind of rejuvenated itself. I doubt very seriously it will get to make anything before frost kills it back, but you can see it's trying. So these are two pumpkins right here where the vine has almost completely died back, but they're not really ripe yet. So I'm just going to kind of leave them right here where they're at least for another week or so and see what happens. Or if you've got any advice for me, please tell me. I mean, the vines are basically dead, so should I just harvest them and maybe put them on the porch to see if they'll continue to ripen? I'm not sure. Maybe I need to go do some research on that. But if you've got any information, you can for sure share it, what to do if that happens, because the vines are pretty much dead, but the pumpkins are not ripe. Gotta get them off the ground. Most of my flowers are beginning to die back, but ageratum, I believe is what this is called. It come from Granny's garden when I first moved into my house, and she always had it. And it's a true, like a moniker of fall. When it starts blooming, I know that fall's here. It does spread crazily, so I have it in all kinds of places. It shows up in my garden as well as in all my flower beds. But it always makes me think of Granny, and it is a pretty bloom, a pretty color. So most of our tomatoes are done for the year, but this little Tommy toe, a few of our little Tommy toes, this is a match cherry, very, very sweet. They're still going strong. And this is one that volunteered itself from last year. So hopefully, I know that it'll probably come up again next year, which is wonderful to have volunteers that produce like this. So this is late September, and I'm still getting little Tommy toes, and they're very sweet too. So these late September days and early October days is when I start thinking about next year's garden, thinking about the flowers that I want, the things I want to plant. And I have great memories of going around this time of the year with Granny, usually with an old envelope that maybe a piece of mail come in, and she would gather flower blooms so that she could then plant the seeds the coming year, the coming summer. So these were some of my prettiest zinnias this year. They were so beautiful back here by the greenhouse, you can see, and some of them have now dried on the dried into seed heads. So I'm gonna, today, my goal is to make sure that I get some of these. I will lay them out on the porch and let them continue to dry, and then I'll break them apart and put them in an old envelope like Granny would do so that I can have them next year. These are some goose beans that a viewer sent me and I planted, and I can't wait to try them again next year because they've done, even though I only planted 1 or 2 and it was very late summer, they still produced for me. So I'm going to try those again next year for sure. So the peppers are still going crazy, and they will until frost, and then they'll be gone overnight. The first hard frost, the pepper plants just turn into mush and just, it's like something has shrunk them. So I expect that'll happen in the next several weeks. Some of you have already had your first frost. I even heard there was frost in Haywood County, which is about 3 or 4 counties away from me, a light frost. We got down into the upper 40s, but we did not have frost. Not yet. So these are sun gold tomatoes, and they're still going, little Tommy toes. They seem to do better as the summer progresses into fall, instead of the bigger tomatoes like Cherokee purples that we love. These are some of the, again, some of the little Matt's cherries that are growing in a different part of the garden. They're still doing pretty good. So this is a little flower bed that I've used over the years. It was just relegated to that end. Anyway, so another way that I would use those dried seed heads is just to go ahead right now in the fall of the year and just throw them down in here. And sometimes that actually works. And next year maybe I'll have that beautiful yellow tall Xena growing right here. So sometimes I do it that way. You can see this kind of these that I've laid down here. Those were bachelor buttons that I had in a different part of the yard. So the same thing, I tried just leaving, I cut back once the stems had went brown, I just brought them and laid them right here, hoping that by next year they'll reseed themselves in this new kind of bed that I've created this summer. So this is probably the last of the green beans for this year, other than my fall ones I've planted, if they make. I'm still not sure how that's going to work out. What I've been doing with these last couple of handfuls that I've been getting is making leather britches. Leather britches are dried green beans, sometimes called shucky beans or shuck beans. So I have a video about green beans, and I'll link to that so you can learn more about leather britches. But I've also working on a video where I've showed how I've been making them, and then later this winter I hope to show you how I cook leather britches. So stay tuned for that one. So here's one more fairly big pumpkin back here in the back that's growing. I'm gonna leave it because its vine's not totally dead, although it's looking pretty bad, but I'm gonna leave it, but it's a pretty good size one too. Nasturtiums have kind of got a new life since the cooler weather's come along. They're such a pretty flower. My nasturtiums have just been beautiful this year. I love the leaves because the little drops of water, you probably can't see it on the camera. Maybe on that one right there you can. Almost looks like little powdery stuff, but that's water. When you move them around, you can see the drops like little diamonds floating around on them on this one. You can see them. Anyway, really pretty, and they're edible, nasturtiums are. We typically don't eat them though. My marigolds are really pretty this year, and in the same way that I would save the Xena seeds, I will start saving the marigold seeds for next year. You can see that one's dried out, it's already there. A lot of these will drop and they'll come back up by themselves next year, but I will go through and pick some of the dried ones off and save them to make sure that I have extra for next year. So another thing about nasturtiums is you can save their seeds too. You can see their seeds after they bloom, they turn into these little kind of pea looking things. You pick these off and you lay them on a paper towel or a newspaper or something and let them dry out, and they'll get real shriveled looking, and then save them till next year and you can replant them. I hope you enjoyed walking around with me for this late summer harvest. There'll still be things that I need to harvest, like tomatoes that are still producing, our peppers, of course, till that first hard frost comes. Some of those pumpkins that I left that I'm hoping ripen. And of course, there's the fall things I'm going to start looking forward to. My kale's up, my turnip's up, I've got some cabbage planted, I've got the peas and the radishes and beets, so I'm looking forward to all that. I hope that you'll leave a comment and tell me, is your garden totally done? Are you still getting some things out of it? And did you plant any fall things? But mostly, I hope you'll continue to drop back by often as I celebrate Appalachia, which always includes a lot of growing your own food.